Alright guys, if you don't know who Spiffing Brit is, he is an absolutely delightful creator, covers a variety of games, talking about how they are all perfectly balanced and definitely don't have an exploit at all. Has also talked about things like the YouTube algorithm and Steam and all of these really fun things. And when he posted on Final Fantasy XIV this last week, I was really excited to sit down, post patch content, and talk about it, because he self-admittedly doesn't know a lot about Final Fantasy XIV, which I play a lot of. And so I wanted to kind of sit down and kind of expand on his points, because while there's not technically anything wrong or false in this video at all, it could be misleading if you actually tried to sit down and learn from it and say, oh, I'm going to go do that stuff in Final Fantasy XIV. It's not exactly how this stuff would work. I don't think that's, I mean, it's not meant to be this like hardcore informational content. It's meant to be entertaining, but I thought it'd be interesting to sit down and say, okay, but what if it was a guide? How would this actually work in Final Fantasy? Because the core concepts that he's doing here do work. So who is Spiffing Brit and what is he up to? I broke this up a lot to make it a lot shorter.
Millionaire in an MMO without actually playing the game, and using only my qualifications as an economist to destroy the entire economy of Final Fantasy XIV. Because yes, instead of questing and playing the storyline and probably becoming a cat girl, I will be studying the market boards and causing a data center-wide hyperinflation event.
Okay, so a data center-wide hyperinflation event. How does that happen? So data centers in this game are like regions, battle groups, whatever you want to call them in various games, and basically they are clusters of servers. Later this year, in not that many months, we're going to have the ability to actually jump between data centers, which would make his verbiage even more exciting, because you play on a localized home server and have the ability to communicate with other ones. Now, as far as the idea of not play the game at all, he does have to get to like level 20 or 22 to unlock a lot of this, I think, because he does need to get to whatever quest unlocks retainers. It might be sooner than that, 15, I don't know. But you do need to play a little bit. He is going to imply in a little bit here you can do this with the free trial, but because of the amount of Gil he wants to make and the market boards and the guilds and all the things he wants to interact with, while you can do the story portion on the free trial, you would have to be a full purchased and subscribed member of the game to do what is going to be discussed in this video. He is going to do it with just 2 retainers. That is the number you start with. The lore justifies this as you've done this great service to these city capitals, and they would like to offer you some of the people that help interact with the market board, these people that kind of sit in the market all day while you're out adventuring, and they're going to go ahead and pay their salaries and handle that. And then you go through a character creation to create them, and you actually say, okay, do you have anybody that looks like this? But it's a character create screen, and they say, oh yeah, I do have somebody that looks like that is named that, but you created them. And so you get 2, and you can increase that number if you choose to add to the cost of your subscription, which there's not really a lore justification for that. It's just money. All right.
Right, welcome into the glorious world of Final Fantasy XIV. We're of course playing as the legendary Jeff Bezos, who currently only has 21,696 Gil, which is this in-game universe's currency of choice. Now here's the problem, 21,000 Gil is not enough. How on earth are we even meant to be scraping by with a living if we have just 21,000 Gil? Now of course, in order to pull off this exploit, you don't need to be a max level character. You don't need to have a huge guild of friends. No, a brand new single individual at level 20 with no prior experience of this video game is going to have all of the necessary powers to become wealthier than all of the top guilds in this game combined. It's just going to take a little bit of creativity. So what do you need to pull this exploit off? Well, namely, you need to reach the part of the game where you can start to hire retainers. The game, of course, is very fun, and heck, you can even get to this point for free using the game's trial system, so you don't even need to pay to pull off this exploit. Anyway, now that we can start hiring retainers, we're going to want to hire ourselves 2 retainers. You can hire more if you actually throw money at the game, but we do not need to do that. 2 retainers is going to be enough. So we're going to hire 2 retainers, and these lovely people are
2 will not be enough to do this at scale, and you cannot be richer than the wealthiest guilds in the game. Because there are literal caps on what your character can hold and literal caps on what your retainer can hold, and there are people that operate at those caps. So like a whole guild of people that are like-minded like that can just amass wealth that you literally cannot hold, especially if you only have 2 retainers.
going to effectively be our interns that are going to be generating us copious amounts of money. And so naturally we're going to make them tiny little children, because I find the greatest unwilling volunteer is a small child, simply because they're much less likely to put up a fight when you're giving them horrific work conditions. So here is our lovely first intern. They shall be intern Steve. Yes, fantastic. Now we shall hire the legendary intern Steve. And there we go. Intern Steve is now our lovely retainer, and we can summon him at any point and we never have to pay him. It's glorious. And best of all, he doesn't even cost money to buy. Oh dear, oh dear. This feels morally dubious. Anyway, we're going to hire another retainer, because the more the merrier. Best of all, he's going to look absolutely identical. This shall be intern Bob. Lovely. Right, intern Steve and intern Bob are two lovely interns to make money.
All right. So, Lalafels are not children. They're just a smaller race of people, just like giants in lore. They're just smaller. So they're not children. And you're not buying them. You don't own them. They just work for you as an adventurer that is in high standing. You do not have access to the market board or the ability to hold more than, I believe, 400,000 gil during the free trial. So you literally just cannot do what he's going over very quickly here. But otherwise, what are retainers and kind of how does this work? Well, in most games, you interact directly with market boards or auction houses. You just walk straight up. In Final Fantasy, you actually have retainers, which act as kind of your bank. They store your items, and so the more retainers you have, the more items you can store. They also determine the number of items you can list. You can only list 20 items per retainer. There's no fee to put it on the market board. There is a fee taken out upon the sale of the item. There is a fee paid for delivery of the item by the purchaser, like a sales tax. And over the years, there's been different ways to kind of avoid those, but then they've kind of removed a lot of those ways. So just in general, just assume there's some fees going around, and you just list those 20 items. Now it is a true auction board, closer to like an eBay model, where you have to buy the entire purchase or else, as opposed to, which is how like World of Warcraft used to work until patch 8.3, when it moved to being a commodity board, which is much closer to how something like Guild Wars works, where you would actually purchase just the amount of something that you want, rather than have to buy an entire listing. And so that does cause some weird behaviors, because if you have 1,000 of something, you can only list it in stacks up to 99, so you would have to already burn through basically half of a retainer to get it all listed. But second of all, if people don't want it in stacks of 99, and you have to list it in 20s, it takes up even more slots. And so people really can only be invested in so many markets, especially if they only have 2 retainers, because you can just only have so many things listed at once. And so a lot of times, because of the inventory limitations and the market board limitations, there's a lot of stuff that people are just trying to dump. Now, in addition to that, let's talk about what the gil is worth. He talks about money here. I would put 1,000,000 gil at about 100,000 gold in World of Warcraft as our most comparable game. He references it as a point of comparison in this video. And I think that that means that it's not that much. My character sits on like 28 right now, and I'm not really actively trying to make money. It just kind of sits there. There's no long-term constant use for gil in the game of a wide scale, and the game is unbelievably generous with gil. You can make 100,000 or more running, like literally just running dungeons, which is not optimized for gil making. You can make tons of money in this game doing just about anything, and the things he's doing do take time. So if you're logged in and you're logging in every day to frantically do the stuff that's taught in this video, and you also enjoy playing, you could also just make the money playing. That would work out fine. The largest use for gil in the game is a house. Houses are in such limited quantity that money is not actually the barrier to entry. It's whether or not houses are available. The most expensive houses in the game are 50 million gil. There are billionaires in the game. So there is just no purpose to the amount of money they have, other than treating it like a high score to see just how many characters they can get to the actual gil cap, where they cannot hold any more on them.
actually preferring to play on the PvP-focused servers, like FFXIV here. And they love servers like FFXIV. There's just one minor problem. Due to the fact that they enjoy servers like FFXIV and their playstyle is...
Okay, so here he's talking about the World of Warcraft players coming over, and he said they're on a PvP-based server. There's no such thing as a PvP-based server. PvP is inherently data center-wide. That's really kind of just how it works. So when you hop into Crystal Conflict and it says their old portrait, it says what server they came from. So there's no need to switch to a different server to play PvP, as well as until patch 6.1, PvP has been a underrepresented part of the game in its entirety. So there is no PvP focused server. There never has been a PvP focused server, and even if you were PvP focused, there would be no reason to switch server for the purpose of PvP. Servers do naturally take on stereotypical personas, but I looked everywhere to see where he found out that FFXIV was PvP based, and I couldn't find any documentation. At the end of the day, so much of the content's locked behind MSQ, so everybody does story, whether or not they like it. At the end game, you're doing dungeons, trials, raids. PvP is just kind of this side mini game. It really doesn't give that much experience beyond like your daily front lines. It's not a wildly large source of Gil, so you just do it to do it. And until they added it with a patch that came out, he recorded this back in February. So like anything that is current at the time of this filming not only didn't exist, but most of it we didn't even know about. We didn't even know it was coming. So I just want to stop and correct that real quick.
Is very different to most other players, these bad boys have massively inflated the market, as they've been flooding gold into this server without the supply of goods increasing. That means that items that would normally cost 1 gold on a different server, suddenly on this server cost, say, 20 gold. This huge economic disparity, of course, exists massively on the marketplace, where items on the FFXIV marketplace are listed at massively inflated prices in comparison to other servers on the exact same data center. Now, these servers we can access instantaneously. There is no cost to moving between the servers. However, on different servers, the items are listed on their local server marketplace, and there is no way to see what across the worlds the market price is at, unless of course you're using market board information.
The reason not everybody's using this is because it's against terms of service. And so to stop and talk about what he's talking about here, you can visit only the other servers on your data center for now. In patch 6.18, we're going to have the ability to jump to different data centers in your region. So North America to North America, EU to EU, Japan to Japan, Oceanic to Oceanic. There are servers that historically sit higher in certain markets than others, based on demand, but prices also do something weird in Final Fantasy. Because there is no cost to list, because there is no constant demand for large amounts of Gil, there's not like a giant money sink in the game. Repairs aren't expensive, raid consumables aren't expensive, you get lots of Gil thrown to you. There are people who don't focus on Gil that I see that play the game a lot that regularly have hundreds of millions of Gil on them. And so being a millionaire is not that big of a deal. I really don't start focusing on money until I drop below 10 million, and that makes me really nervous. I push it back up, and then I just slowly let it bleed. But I've given Gil away on stream. It doesn't matter. And so, but there's also something weird that happens with prices. In general, prices can be very volatile, and over the lifetime of an item, most often an item goes down in value, and that's it in MMOs. Items never expire. Items never have, like, you never have milk that expires. Milk is going to be a big point in this video. And you never have items that are different. If I find a sword of the whatever today, and then I find a sword of the whatever 6 months from now, they are identical in every way. There is no stat variety. They are just a flat item ID and are identical, period. Some items, there is a high and a low quality version, but the high qualities are all the same. The low qualities are all the same. There's a minor stat difference between them, and that's it. So what happens with the prices? Well, basically, because people can list for free, and listings, as long as you're playing regularly and checking in with your retainer, last forever, your price is now the ceiling. Nobody would ever list above you because then their item wouldn't sell. And so you are now the maximum price that that item can be unless there is large demand that is causing turnover in that market. Now another player comes up and decides to list. He's going to talk about milk, and when I did go out to some of these websites that use TOS breaking API fetches to kind of grab this data. A lot of these servers have more listed in some of these items than will sell in an entire week. So you're never going to have, outside of like patch releases or these big waves, you're never going to have times where the number of buyers just wildly outpaces supply in a large number of markets. It's going to be a specific few markets that end up kind of upside down, and they're going to correct. And so there's going to be this downward pressure because the newest person listing is always going to list lower. They're going to list for free. They don't really need the money, and their listing lasts forever. So they are the new ceiling. They don't care how much they undercut you by. Maybe they're playing on controller and they're just being lazy and it defaults to the vendor price. And so it's not uncommon to be undercut wildly, constantly, and forever. And so it just undercuts you and it just pushes the prices down and down and down over and over and over, unless there is something about that particular patch cycle that is pushing them back the other way. He's focused on Ovibos milk. Ovibos milk comes from bicolored gemstones. So if we move into a patch cycle that encourages a lot of fates, which is the source of bicolored gemstones, then all of a sudden everybody's flooded with bicolored gemstones. They're at cap on bicolored gemstones. Ovibos milk will plummet because we won't have a need for Ovibos milk at the rate that people are generating it. And as people undercut, it's just going to undercut faster and faster. People also typically assume that undercutting by a lot will make something sell faster than undercutting by a little. It doesn't. In my experience, people just buy the lowest price. It's at the top and they just move on. The only time that somebody really buys something of a higher price is when like the stack size is there. Something like materia that I only need 2 or 3 of. Items, they're like these gems that I insert into my gear. I only need 2 or 3. Somebody lists a stack at 99. I'm not going to buy 99. And so I'll pay a little bit more to get a quantity that's actually closer to what I can use.
Like we are here.
All right. So I ended up jumping ahead here.
In a video game, there is no import and export taxes. There is no cost of logistically moving it from one world or the next. I simply have to walk from...
There is a wait time during peak hours.
That market board there to that giant crystal there. A process that takes, well, I mean about 10 seconds?
Okay, so not 10 seconds. So let's talk about World Visit here. World Visit is basically your ability to jump to another server. You can stay there for up to 30 days and you have to come home. While you're there, you may not sell goods. So you are stuck at the prices of whatever server you call your home world. So if your home world is the cheapest for a particular item, you can't do anything he's about to describe because you can't sell on any world but your own because that's where your retainers live and they cannot world visit. You also cannot access your retainers while you're abroad. So you have to come home to get your money out, which he never uses the minus key. That's way faster. And so you can jump around to different servers. Soon you'll be able to jump around to different data centers within your region. But that all takes time. Sometimes it can take during peak hours, especially on patch weeks, it can take a non-zero amount of time. So yes, you do just click. It is not just 10 seconds in many cases for people that are doing this regularly, and it really adds up. So when you're looking at like the fact that he says he's not playing, doing this method and staying on top of market and babysitting it to stay on top of the undercutters and buy the ones that undercut by a lot to add to your stockpile, and then move your prices slightly down to be the new lowest price for people that undercut by a small amount, that's a constant amount of work. And so I just want to be aware that like when you say you're not playing the game, in games like Final Fantasy that are very, very casual friendly, sitting in town and not being productive is playing the game. So you're not really like doing anything. There isn't like, this is phrased because it's Spiffing Brit and it's wildly entertaining and it's fun. It seems like I bypassed the system. I'm doing something nobody else is doing. But if you look around his screen, there are people standing in Limsa Laminsa just doing emotes. They're playing the game. Like they're doing nothing. Nothing. And so it's like saying he's like bypassing is just a fun exaggeration that kind of is in theme with Spiffing Brit videos. This very like, I've discovered something so wildly exploitive and out of balance. But the reason people don't do this is because the act of jumping world to world to go use partial search in a market board, to buy up items, to put in your limited inventory, to come back and put in your limited listings, to collect the money is tedious. And it feels a lot like you're actually doing something.
Now, the challenge is simple. I have 100,000 gil, and I want to be able to make 1,000,000 with as little effort as possible. If I can make any more, then that's fantastic. But the goal is to make as much money with playing as little of the game as humanly possible. There will be no quests, there will be no fun, there will just be raw market data. Let's see if I can pull it off. On this market board, we have access to all of the items being sold here on FFXIV. Now, effectively, we're going to use this market board to just see which items are exorbitantly overpriced, and then we're going to work out where they're being sold on the cheap. So we're going to use the galactic-wide cross-world market board for all of the markets on our data center, where we can, you know, for example, take a look at the gadget lever market, which is pretty much entirely dominated by two accounts, the Fred's merchant, the potions merchant, and I guess, of course, Shaft.
Remember, they are dominated by these accounts because those people came in and chose that as their market. They have a limited number of listings, and other people with limited number of listings didn't go into that market.
Handler. Now, all three of these accounts are controlled by the Walt Speculative Guild, and as you can imagine, they've cornered the entire bloody market, haven't you? Haven't you, you naughty people? Yes? Well,
sorry.
oh,
Not
well.
sorry.
I mean,
Okay, but like, before we talk about the fact that this plugin is once again, against terms of service, what is happening? In the top here, we have current listings. They have listed stacks of 99 because they have a limited number of stacks, so they've got to get them gone. And so they've got their big stacks of 99. How are they being purchased? They're being purchased down in actual usable quantities. So somebody might want to buy some of this, like they might want to buy a small amount, and they can't now until other people list. So I could actually come in and list maybe even above them, but likely the prices will just plummet again. And they're going to get stuck with this because when you look at the last 20 listings that happen here, which like recent history, when you look at like recent buys and things like that, it only shows you 20 back. But it is possible this server only consumes 500 a day, 1,000 a day. And so if you are buying up everything that people list and people go, oh, wow, Gaja's selling really well, I'll sell a bunch of Gaja that's sitting on my bank. And then you buy all that up. And then somebody else goes, oh my gosh, I like farming Gaja leather. And they go get it and they undercut you. And then you're like, oh, well, I'll just buy that up. And you just keep buying it up. You can end up holding the bag where you end up with thousands and thousands and thousands. Once again, in your limited inventory, you can end up with thousands and thousands and thousands of this. Thank God it stacks to bigger than 999 in your inventory. Like, there was a time when that wasn't true. And so you can stack this up, but you'll never get rid of it. Like, it is possible that if you build up to 10,000 of this now and you only list 20 listings at a time, it is possible that you're still holding this a month from now. And what's the price going to look like a month from now since you're no longer in the act of acquisition? So just be really careful doing this at the scale they're doing it, because for all the times it works, there are also times where it doesn't. So just be really aware of that because of the nature of Final Fantasy XIV markets.
it's money at the end of the day. We like money. Oh, goodness. Right, let's go make some cash. So, what item are we looking at today?
Food/meals and potions, because it is reset and people are going to be raiding. If we capitalize that market, there you go.
Perfect. So, potions and food are going to be cheap because it is raid day. Food, of course, giving buff.
I think he did this on the 25th of February, which I don't think is a Tuesday, just to get nitpicky here. Maybe it is. I thought I looked earlier and it was a Friday, because I was like, oh, when did he do this? Back in February. And so February 25th is a Friday, which is not reset. Reset in MMOs almost across the board is Tuesdays. But it is a good note. It is a good note. There are times within a patch cycle, which is 4 months. There are times within a week, which starts every Tuesday. And there are times of day, and those can affect some of these markets. To play these market boards at that level of volatility does take that you're available at those times to kind of be able to buy when the market's low and get it listed, and then babysit it when the market's high, so that somebody else that doesn't come in slightly under you doesn't sell the daily amount and then you get nothing. And so cheap food on Friday makes sense because people will have done their raids Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, Thursday nights. And as we move into the weekend, there's more players on. The majority of the player base is not in Savage using, which is the hardest difficulty raids, using food. And so the amount of ingredients flooding the market from every crafter and gatherer and things like that goes up. but the amount of Savage content being cleared has already, like, the consumables for the week has largely already been bought up. So it's a great day to buy, but not because it's reset day. So I just want to, like, take their phrasing and say, like, don't misunderstand what they're saying here. Their idea is absolutely correct. I just don't want to misunderstand why it's working the way they're describing.
When you're raiding, so meals are gonna be at inflated prices. So what about is there a cup of tea on here?
Well, yeah, there's the, if you raise the...
Oh, did I misread? Is it the 22nd? I would not buy food on a Tuesday.
Demand, sorted by demand. There should be peach juice and Thavnarian chai, which is the closest tea you're going to get.
Oh, Thavnarian chai sounds very nice. Oh, look at that. That actually looks really tasty. A lovely chai tea. And that...
Okay, so... I've got these cuts in here where I thought I was going to want to say something. So the types of food that they pick. Foods do different things. They offer different stats. And so because certain job types have priority, certain food types have priority. The amount, there is only 2 tanks, 2 healers, but there's a majority of DPS, but that DPS is split across different DPS types. And so you end up with different foods having different demand levels. It also has to do with where those ingredients come from. Some ingredients feel much easier or much more relaxing to get to than others. Some ingredients are much more scalable to get to than others. Some ingredients can actually be gathered by those retainers that he did, which is an enormous source of basically free materials. And so as you look at these different materials, the amount of supply and the amount of demand on that material is important. And so the fact that they're picking milk, which pumps into a number of foods, is a logical choice. You want to understand why certain ingredients are acting the way they are. So we know that, like, this week, for example, the crafted gear from last patch became upgradable, which suddenly means that there are a lot of people who are going to go, you know what? I think crafting gear actually looks pretty good right now. And so crafting gear, which was wildly high priced at the beginning of last patch, had just slowly declined as the number of people who needed the gear dropped and the number of people that were able to make the gear went up. You just naturally had more supply, less demand, and the prices plummeted. But all of a sudden, people can only have so much listed. Every piece you list is one of your 20 listings. There were only so many pieces listed on Tuesday when the patch went live, and so you ended up with a huge push in the number of people that wanted that crafted gear, and so it temporarily spiked. And so you can predict that coming because you can look at the patch notes and you can say, okay, what about the game is changing? And you can actually look at this stuff because of things like live letters where the devs sit down and tell us what's coming. You can actually prep for this in advance. I would recommend creators like Ash10 who do exactly this. They speculate based on upcoming news and they make wide-scale, large investments into the server, into their servers that look at, like, how would this work on a really massive scale? And they spend basically all of patch day looking at the changes and just making money.
Is being sold at 3,296.
Oh, it is the 22nd.
Here.
Good call.
So let's see how
I read
it's doing
25th.
over here. I'm noticing that on Lamia, this bad boy normally sells for 2,000 gil. So there's a price differential of 50% here. And in fact, on Leviathan, it's also selling for just under 2,000 gil as well. So guess I might as well go over to Leviathan and buy up all of their lovely chai tea. All right, I'm going to quickly move over to Leviathan and visit another world server. This, of course, doesn't cost us anything to do, and I just think most players don't understand that this feature exists in the game.
No, I think it's that it's tedious. The act of having to go, you can only do it from capital city Aetherites. Limsa, in my opinion, is the best one because there's a market board right next to it. You can only interact with market boards at market boards. And then you have to access your retainers at your home world, and there's a retainer bell next to market boards. So I think it's that it's tedious. The act of what he's doing here, you can easily spend several hours a night doing what he's doing. I have done it. I've made, at the beginning of Shadowbringers, I was making 1 million gil an hour, cycling through Materia, because there was kind of some massive changes in the way all that works at the beginning of an expansion. And so I was just printing money. But, like, that meant that I wasn't playing, and I was doing it 2 to 3 times a day for an hour or two at a time, and like it was recovering. The prices were plummeting it again within hours. So you have to kind of babysit it. This is not a set it and forget it type thing. If his listings do not sell on the day he lists this, which I read 25th, it's the 22nd of February, you would end up with the listings just sitting there out there idle, and because the people underneath you are now the lowest listing, if their stuff isn't selling, yours will never be the lowest price again. So if you want stuff to sell really regularly so that you can get access to your 20 listing slots again, you've got to constantly be updating your prices to make them go lower and lower and lower until they're sold. So there's a lot more babysitting required than I think what's being implied here, because honestly, the babysitting is not the fun part. And he's talking about the fun part.
I just don't think people know.
They know. They know. So
Don't believe me? Take a look at the price of milk, ladies and gentlemen. The price of milk across the entire data center is currently in a death spiral. The reasoning is very simple. We can take a look at the history of milk here and see that something terrible has gone wrong. Hao Zhao has bought up the entire server's milk supply. Don't know who this dude is? Well, you might remember him as one of our friends from the start of the video. Now, he's basically been doing exactly what we've doing, but with a slightly greater understanding of the game. He's effectively the demonstration of what happens when you pull off this exploit and you have a complete understanding of economical theory, but you've also played the game before, meaning you actually understand which items have really high demand. Now, he's made so much money over the last few days, with a few spare millions lying around. What he's done is he's gone and bought all of the milk off of the entire data center. As you can see, he has bought so much milk, it has decimated the entire world's economy, and he's just gone here to set the price of milk on our server to 1,300 gold. This is a commodity that is usually just 500 gil. But the madman has done it. He has bought so much milk, it has gone up in value. So naturally, what have I done? I've also run off onto one of the necessary servers, and I've also been buying up milk. I've got 55 milk here. I'm going to list it up. I'm going to sell it, of course, for the market value price of, oh my goodness, some dude just dumped milk in for 15 gil. Quick, grab it whilst he hasn't noticed his mistake. Get to the market board. Steve, bugger off to the market board. Milk, milk, give me my milk. Of it, boss. Quick, come on, 15 gil, 14 gil, we're back, bye.
Okay, so there was a couple things that happened there really quickly. First of all, the person listed at 15, by the time he got there, that was a different retainer selling it for 14. That's how fast this stuff crashes. That has literally been listed at that price more than once. And so that is how fast things plummet. That is how long it takes for people to crash your market. So then what will happen is somebody else will go to list, they'll see the 15, they don't feel like buying it up because you can't buy it up from the listing screen. As he noticed, like you have to leave it, you have to get out of your retainer, then go to the market board and search it, and it's a whole mess. You can pull your money out a little faster than he did with just the minus key, but other than that, it's a bit of a pain to constantly toggle. And what'll happen is somebody else will come in, they'll go, all right, there's some idiot selling a handful of it very cheap to just get it out of their inventory. I'll go ahead and just list mine in between, and they'll cut it down to 500. Well, if he bought at 598 to list at 1397, and it gets listed down to 500, and there's a fee collected when it sells, he now has to lose money for the privilege of having more money taken out. So that's how markets crash that fast, because they do. They crash that hard and that quickly. So you notice that his friend bought up lots of it. That is why it's incredibly risky to do this large scale. There are people that make immense amounts of money doing this, but not because they're not playing the game. It's because they're actively sitting there doing this a lot. They get to know their markets. They get to know the quantities they should be operating in. They have lots of working capital, so if they occasionally lose money, it's no big deal. And this is the way they play. This is the way they play. It's not an exploit. There's nothing unethical about this. It's just arbitrage. It's actually something that the devs, when they added data center, they said that they wanted to be able to link the market boards together, and this was the closest they got, and they trusted that players would be able to then kind of help some markets correct when some markets just run out of something and it's either exorbitant prices or not available at all. You know, you can go visit other servers. We're encouraging that. So it's not really exploitative in any way. It's just the way it's desired to work. And as we go into data center visit, they confirmed that once again that, yeah, we want you to be able to buy from other ones. Go do it. So it's I don't know. This is, like, it's fun the way he edited it, but it's a sign that, like, that's just a reminder of, like, why this might not always work.
One thing is for certain, the more money you have to invest, the faster the profits and greater the profits you're going to get out. It's just like real life. Capitalism is completely and utterly broken, baby, and I love it. And, well, literally just a few minutes later, 50 of my milk churns have just sold for 61,750 gil. Jesus Christ! Oh no! Oh god, the server is currently being racked by some of the worst hyperinflation I've ever seen, just simply due to the fact that milk has now become absolutely horrifically expensive. There is just no way to counter the new...
So, it's not that expensive. 60,000 gil's not a lot. And remember that it's not milk like you buy at the grocery store. Milk in this game, Ovabos milk, is bought from bicolored gemstones. Bicolored gemstones, you have to go out in the world and fight like a little mini world boss type encounter. They take a certain number of minutes depending on how many people are there. And then you're rewarded with a currency called bicolored gemstones. You take those bicolored gemstones to a vendor in the zone called Garlemald, and you actually buy up Ovabos milk there. You can also get it as a drop rate off of Ovabos, just off of cows. And so you can go kill these yak creatures or whatever, and it's in their loot table that drops. And so you have to go do open world content. Open world content is not the most popular content in Final Fantasy XIV. And so to get this is relatively to the whole player population not as desirable as other types of content. And so the price is based on the fact that you are paying for people that do enjoy or are willing to go do that style of content. You are paying them for that, or you're paying people that have kind of arbitrage this, which is the act of taking a commodity from one space and selling it in another space and taking the difference as a profit. And so it's fun because it sounds like it's milk, like it's in the real world. But if you think of it as just item ID, it's actually just an item that is acquired in that one limited way. Once you get it once, like, I believe you can send retainers out for this. Chat's saying you can send retainers out for this. So then it becomes even more acquirable. So really, if you're looking at what this price should be, you would compare it to the other items that are only acquirable in those ways. That way, when people have bicolored gemstones, they're going to say, well, how much is a bicolored gemstone worth? And they're going to put their bicolored gemstones in whichever bicolored gemstone resource is worth the most money. It doesn't matter if it's milk or peas or wheat or berries or like hide. It doesn't matter what the word is. It matters how I got it.
New value of milk on this server, because as soon as new milk enters the market, there's just simply no way to counter the amount of milk being sold right now. It is absolutely insane, but hey, that's 61,750 gil that we're about to take. Now, the interesting question is going to be, what's going to happen to the rest of our market on this server? Well, the most important thing to note is that with Ovibos milk being so expensive, items that are made using Ovibos milk are about to get more expensive too. These also just so happen to be all of the late game food items.
So you would think so. You would think so. In economic terms, you would think what he's describing here is absolutely the case. That's not actually the case in Final Fantasy, because there is a large community feeling that if you go gather the resources yourself, then they are free. Because much in the way that he is counting his time in a video game because it's fun, doesn't necessarily get calculated at the same value. You don't show up to your job and work for free, but it's just a game. We're having fun. Who cares? And so it is not uncommon, because crafting something gets you crafting experience and you enjoy doing it, or you enjoy the act of gathering the milk yourself. It is not uncommon for the good that something is made into to sell less than the raw materials that make it. So he's speaking in general economic terms, but those don't necessarily apply here.
That we see right at the top of the meal demands tree. Favnarian chai, the pumpkin potage, the beef stroganoff, even the Saikon cookie. And guess what? All of these items sit right at the end of the supply chain. And guess what? The most crucial ingredient to make all of them just increased in price by over 50 times. So what happens when you're a baker and some dude just jacked up the prices of all of your necessary ingredients? Well, you're going to increase your prices too. So instead of buying the last few remaining bits of milk in the server, instead, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to start seeing if we have a way to actually start planning the incoming apocalypse that's about to rock this server. Now, what this database is about to see is one of the greatest supply shortages ever, being caused quite literally by one individual buying up every single bit of milk this entire database has to offer. And as we can see in the recent purchases that have occurred, there are literally people right now on FFXIV as of a few minutes ago who were buying milk at 1,300 a piece simply because the Favnarian chai is selling at 2,700. So to a high-level craftsperson, the fact that they're paying 1,400 for milk isn't even that bad. So naturally, we're going to start snapping up this market even more. We're going to buy this bit of milk here and this bit of milk here. The entire market will be ours, ladies and gentlemen. We have to buy up as much of the stock as possible if we are to stay afloat in the coming financial troubles that are going to be caused by this economical collapse.
Okay, so that's not going to affect the entire game's market at all. It's not going to affect the cost of crafted gear. It's not going to affect the cost of materia. It is only going to affect the item that he is specifically in. If you start doing this wide scale, and you start also trying to sell off your dungeon loot that you're getting, that breaks down into these crafting items. So if you desynthesize that dungeon loot and you start trying to sell that off, and then you try some fishing and gathering, and you try to sell that off, you're quickly going to get where the number of items you have to sell and the number of listings available to you, especially if you only have 2 retainers, you have to start deciding what to sell. His friend there had all these listings of the same thing, which means all the other stuff that they acquire in the game, they can't be selling. And so there are times when I have so many things listed. I have 4 retainers, and so I have 80 listings listed. And so because I have 80 listings listed, I can't afford to list something where my profit margin is only paying me 10 or 20,000 gil, because I have other things that are of greater value. And so it's not worth dealing with. Definitely not the little like Lamentin anchovies and things like that he's doing. A lot of times those are just trash. And so I would rather vendor them. There are things in this game that sell on the market board below vendor cost, which means you can buy them up, take them to an NPC, or even from your retainer, tell your retainer to sell it to an NPC, and you can pocket more money than you spent. Markets in this game are not broken by this behavior. If anything, they are corrected by this behavior. So I thought this was a really fun video. I just wanted to kind of shed some light on how some of this might work for you if you decide to go out and do what's done here. It does work. It absolutely does. You are limited to only the things that your server is not already the lowest price on your data center, and you are limited to things that people are actually buying. And on top of that, you are limited in the number of items you can list at one particular time. So that it's all restricted, and it's very easy when you get too far into this to say, oh my gosh, I bought 100 and I made 10,000 gil. Then I bought 1,000 and I made 100,000 gil. So I bought 60,000, and it's not all selling. And then you get stuck holding the bag. And so just keep track of what the difference between profit is, because when your retainer gets the money back, remember that you invested some in that. So if you put 100,000 gil into the market and you come back the next day and you're like, sweet, my retainer sold everything, and there's 98,000 gil here. You just put 100,000 gil away for 24 hours for the privilege of coming back to less. And so does this work? Yeah. Is this a really fun video? Absolutely. Should you do this? If you find it fun, do this. But to say that you're making millions of gil without playing the game, I would say, I guess you are, kinda.